This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Calls for more negotiation and more legislation in the ongoing fight over the consolidation of the schools. Tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We're joined tonight by Senator Jim Kyle, Minority Leader in the State Senate. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Eleanor Boudreau, correspondent with WKNO FM Radio. Thanks for being here. Also Ken Hoover, who was elected to the now vacated Germantown School Board, and we'll talk more about that. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And Bill Dree, senior reporter from the Memphis Daily News. Well, let's start with where we are a couple weeks after the Hardy Mays ruling. I want to start with you, Senator Kyle. You this week put forward an idea that has been, it seems, well received, which is that Kevin Huffman, the state's head of education department, be something of an honest broker who step into the negotiations and help out the various parties. Tell us what your idea is and what you hope that could gain for the various parties involved.
Well, I believe that if we don't change the mindset that we've had throughout these negotiations and discussions from a political mindset to an education mindset. The question we have in this community is how you educate 150,000 people in an efficient, effective, and accountable way, and what is a structure can do that. There are a lot of good people in Shelby County involved in education who know something about education, but everyone in this community has a dog in the fight, so to speak. I thought that Commissioner Huffman and his staff, being experts in education, but not necessarily being intensely involved, would be that person who could come in and have the knowledge of how you can look at this problem without having been viewed as being for or against one idea or one side or the other. And so I think what the process needs is an honest broker. He is our state education commissioner. He does have a skill set that would be very valuable, and I think he would bring something to the table. And I spoke to him about it. He seemed very interested. I spoke to Mark Norris, who is the majority leader in the Senate, and Mark seemed to think it was a reasonable idea, and I've written all the elected officials in this community and have asked people to take a step back and let's look at this as an educational issue, not a political question. Well,
let's bring you in, Ken, and I introducing you as we joked before the show. I mean, it's not a joke, but it's a little awkward. You were elected to the school board, Germantown School Board, that was set up under various provisions and then was struck down. So, as you said, you got your certificate of election, but it really didn't amount to much. But you, nonetheless, have been very involved in schools. You're not a party to any of the lawsuits, but what's your perspective? Let's start there on that idea of bringing in Kevin Huffman as a kind of an honest broker, and specific to him, would that be helpful? And generally, is it time for people to start talking and ratchet down the lawsuits?
Yeah, I think it's clear that this entire controversy was born of politics. It's grown up in a political conversation. So it would be terrific to get the politics out of the conversation and talk about what's best for the children. What is the best structure for delivering education in Shelby County? If we could have that conversation, we would have never seen the county commission oppose municipal school districts. If we strictly evaluated things on what's the best model for delivering education in Shelby County. There are a lot of other factors at play, and money is a big, big part of that. So never lose sight of the fact that the money that flows from the state and the county is a significant component to this conversation. I don't think it can do anything but help to have Commissioner Huffman come in and look for common ground. But if you look at the referendum in the suburbs over funding for education, the sales tax referendum, and the 80-20 vote that we saw in the suburbs, and you look at a similar question in Memphis, where it lost by a similar margin, 70-30, you start to get a sense that common ground is going to be difficult to find. That doesn't mean we shouldn't search for it, and we should look hard, but it may be difficult to find.
If not the common ground, if there isn't sort of a unified overarching solution, people have talked about charter schools or some way that there still could be some autonomy for municipal schools within the unified district, so starting even next year. Is that a possibility? Have you talked to people about that?
I've had some conversations, and as you mentioned, I've been vacated.
Yeah.
The misconception that's out there in the community, and what I would like to argue against, is Judge Mays has not said we can't have municipal school districts. As we sit here this evening, the law of the land is when consolidation is complete, you can form a municipal school district. Now, clearly, there's a decision to be made, papers to be filed by December 27th. We don't have his final word on that, but what we said in the prep room, the judge closed the fast lane. The fast lane has been taken off the table, but the road to municipal schools as of this moment is still open. Now, will it close? Perhaps. And would charter schools be a viable alternative? I'm sure we'll talk about that more as the program goes on, but there are a lot of questions to be answered to affirm that yes, that could be a viable option.
Yeah, if the judge's ruling had gone more in your favor, would you want to talk right now with the other side?
I have had a lot of conversations well before the municipal school election with members of the Unified Board. And there's some outstanding people serving on that board. I think Billy Orgel is one of the best things that's happened to public education in Shelby County in a long time. He is doing yeoman's work as the chairman of that board. The conversations we have had are, how do we work together? How do we form municipal school districts in a way that is not harmful to the Unified District, but is in fact helpful to the Unified District? And I think Senator Kyl would agree, that's one of the things that needs to change in Shelby County. The level of cooperation between Shelby County schools and Memphis City schools was poor. We can't achieve our mutual potential if we let that continue.
Senator, is what prompted your call for Commissioner Huffman to mediate this? Was it the prospect of what's happening now locally toward the formation of a unified school district, or was it the prospect of a third consecutive year of action by the legislature on this issue?
Well, I have real concerns about the legislature being involved in this issue. This is clearly a local matter, and we have for 2 years in a row gone to folks who live in Knoxville and Chattanooga and Kingsport and have said, we have a solution to our local problem that we want you to ratify. Generally speaking, we don't want to do that, and generally speaking, I have concerns about that. But I truly do believe that the suburban legislators are real opinion leaders on this issue within the General Assembly. And if there is a plan created that had their support, I believe it would put people in a position where they would feel like they needed to do that again. But that's why I thought that Commissioner Huffman, being a part of the administration, could work with the suburban legislators, work with our local government officials, and again, be that person that can say, again, how much autonomy can the city, people who live within the city of Memphis, live with, for those who go to school outside the city of Memphis, and where does that? How do you structure that? How do you function that? And I believe there are while we have good people in our legislature, I think it's a better if it's thought of in terms of what's best for education wise and not necessarily what's best for my politics.
So do you think autonomy is the key issue that's on the table here at the outset of this?
I think it's one of the issues. I mean, I'm just looking at it for somebody who has not been involved in any meetings on it. I mean, I had an election this fall. I had things going on. I have not been very much involved in the discussions, but it does seem to be that from where I sit, it does seem to be two questions to be thought of. How much? I mean, to me, the suburbs seem to want a level or complete autonomy over their schools. People inside the city of Memphis are very uncomfortable with that because people inside the city of Memphis see that as creating further isolation in the city of Memphis, and therefore creating an additional drive for the migration out of the city of Memphis to the suburbs, which is not healthy for this county.
But to some degree, you hear some people saying, I mean, I hear people saying that as well. And you hear some people saying, though, that it's really about funding. That they feel like if they let you, I'll put you in a bad spot, they let you go, they let the Germantown schools go, that somehow that's going to take all this funding and drain funding off of the city schools.
And buildings.
And the buildings and so on. What is your take on that fear? Because there's so much fear that drives this process on both sides. But address that fear that people have within the city.
When you have a conflict like we have here, it's built upon misinformation, misunderstanding, and mistrust. And that's what we have here. But your question about funding, absolutely, it's not a theory. State law is very clear that any money appropriated by the county is allocated among school districts on an ADA basis. In fact, Memphis City Schools took a case all the way to the Supreme Court 50 years ago to make clear that's the law of the land. So there's no question that when we open a school district with 5,000 or 8,000 students, that will attract funding from the county commission. We'll get our ADA share, we'll get our BEP funding from the state, and that money will be under the control of the Germantown Municipal School Board and completely inaccessible to the Unified School Board. So for my opinion, a great deal of the resistance from city interests is tied to control over that funding. When Charlotte Mecklenburg came in to tell the Transition Planning Commission, here's how you run a unified school district, a key feature of that presentation was you take funding away from the suburban schools and redirect it to the urban schools, and that's how you balance your resources. If we have municipal school districts, that ability to do that goes away.
Well, Eleanor, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious. I don't see a lot of common ground here. I see why people might want to talk, but what is there to compromise on in this situation?
I think Ken would be more knowledgeable in that area than I have because I've been in the discussions. But it would seem to me the two questions that need to be asked is, again, goes back to what do the people in the suburbs want? Do they want their own school system completely isolated from the rest of other municipal school districts and from Shelby County? Or do they want control over, or have some autonomy over the management of those school systems? I mean, it really comes down to how who's teaching your child in the day, and what resources they have to teach them with. I think that's the question, and you can accomplish. I mean, if we spend our time talking about who is teaching the child and what are the resources that they have when your child goes to the school, and less about my ADA share, then I think we can then get back to where we need to be.
So, and I should say ADA is average daily attendance. BEP is
basic education program.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was in the room when Memphis voted to give up their charter. That was in December of 2010, almost 2 years ago to the day. And since that date, I've heard a lot of people who live in the city and live in the county outside of the city of Memphis say, we need to get past, it's about the kids, none of this. And, as we go through this process, the issue has really gotten narrowed, down to municipal schools, because we had a judge's order that laid out the Transition Planning Commission. So, as the issue has gotten narrower, I'm seeing less and less room for compromise, and it's hard for me to see what's different about this time around.
Yeah, and let's get you involved, Ken, on that, because again, going back to where the compromise, as you laid out, what Germantown wants, what Bartlett wants, is control of that money. They apparently don't, so many people don't want that money to be redistributed into the urban school district, right? Yeah. I mean, and so if that's the point, how do you secure that money without real independence?
Right, and I don't believe that what the municipalities want is control of that money.
Okay.
But I will make this point, and Bill has sat through all the TPC meetings, or many of them. Don't know how much you've reviewed the Finance Committee's work, but a startling realization that comes out of the TPC work is Memphis City Schools, or the 100,000 student school district. So forget about MCS, SCS, Shelby County, Memphis City. The 100,000 student school districts got 15% more funding, a shorter school day, and larger class sizes. Right. How can that be? It is the smaller is better mantra, When you have layers of management, those resources poured in the top layer get siphoned off before they find the classroom. And I agree with Senator Kyle. It is all about what happens in the classroom. The TPC plan calls for eliminating 160 teaching positions in the suburbs. Right. The school board hasn't opined on whether we're going to go to a shorter 6.5-hour school day or the Shelby County 7-hour school day. Shortening the school day, decreasing teachers, increasing class size, those are not pathways to educational excellence. That's what we want control over, is the ability to ensure that as much of the resources as possible makes it into the classroom.
And Bill, let me ask you a little bit, to some of the reporting you did this week, and Eleanor, you may have too, but on some frustration, and it to some degree speaks to what Ken is saying, which is frustration within the Unified School Board. Billy Warrigal, the chair of that, who's been very widely praised across the board, has started to express frustration with the administration of the Unified School not moving fast enough. Not moving fast enough to settle all kinds of questions, some along the lines of what Ken just said. And so tell us a little bit about what you wrote about that growing frustration of the board with the slow-moving Unified School Board, the slow-moving Unified Administration, and the slow movement on the various recommendations from the TPC.
Well, Orgel specifically raised the possibility of the school board taking back over the process of, in essence, setting what the merged school district is going to look like. He did this actually the day of the judge's ruling, about a half hour before it. He basically said if the recommendations we're getting can't come up with more savings for us in forming this merged school district, then he might be open to the board taking back over the process and moving away from what they're doing now, which is a set of administrators from the city school system, a set of administrators from the county school system in this steering committee, which is making recommendations on the TPC recommendations.
Yeah, and Ken, isn't that the sort of bureaucracy that gives folks in the suburbs chills? You know, that it's that sort of decision, and the money, like you said, the money coming in the top, and it goes through a bigger bureaucracy. It's more efficiently spent and distributed. And I guess critics would say you're seeing that right now as they try to make an even bigger school system.
Yeah, when combining the school districts is going to cost more. What suburban residents want is a school district that's close to the people that it serves, that's responsive to the people that it serves. The further away you get from the people you serve, which is what happens when you have a 800 square mile school district with 7 members representing nearly 1 million people. The further away you get from the people you serve, the less responsive you are to the people you serve. The more adults you gather under the umbrella, which we're looking at something north of 10,000 employees, the easier it becomes to focus on the adults. And let's get all hung up on what are we going to do with custodial services and how are we going to handle teacher hiring, and let's focus on the adults, and oh yeah, by the way, there are children involved. The closer you are to the people you serve, the higher the emphasis will be on the children that are served by that school district.
And let me bring you back in, Senator Kyle. I mean, this is in part the argument that people have made for charter schools. And you've seen in the last, I don't know how many years, that the state has introduced charter schools with some limits. I guess last session, the caps were taken off. And there is a tidal wave, some would say, of charter schools coming across the state, but especially into Memphis. Is that a point? I don't even know where you stand. We didn't ask you where you stand on charter schools, but that's the kind of thing that critics of big school systems say, and why municipal school districts are favored by some people and why charter schools are favored by some people.
I truly believe if you ask the average citizen in the city of Memphis whether they care whether Germantown has a school system or not, I think most of them don't care. But what they will say then, but I'm not going to pay for it. I'm not going to subsidize it. I'm not subsidizing someone else's school system by diverting dollars, my tax dollars, to a school system that my child can't go to. Now, that is it's like, I mean, I've used this analogy, which may not be very good, but it's like cable TV. I mean, we've got basic cable, we've got basic education. People in Germantown, they want more than basic cable. Well, then they can pay for it and they can have it and they can go with it and that's great. As I said on the Senate floor during the Norris Todd debate, if the suburban schools were so great, then why aren't people moving out there in droves and leaving Memphis to go out there? If you will, it's not like it's against the law for you to move from East Memphis to Germantown if you think you're getting a better education. People aren't generally doing that. There is a slow migration, but that isn't driving. What people in Memphis don't want to be done is I think, what I don't, I'm not going to talk for people in Memphis, what Jim Kyle doesn't want is, as a senator from the city of Memphis, isolating my city school system. I mean, what we've not talked about is the socioeconomic cost of educating people. It costs more to educate people within the city of Memphis and Germantown. It has nothing to do with bureaucracy. It has everything to do with socioeconomic conditions that those children live in. And we don't want, and it's going to cost more to do that, and we don't have any support from people who live outside the city of Memphis.
But now that I'm going to show my naivete, but doesn't, now that the city has released its charter, even with municipal school districts, to some degree, the money still flows down from the county, correct? Even when if you guys break off in 2014 or so on, there's still a certain amount of control at the county commission level.
So when you talk about school funding, people's eyes glaze over and they just tune out. But there's really four big pieces. Federal piece, which is fairly significant for Memphis City Schools, the state piece, which is the biggest piece for everybody, the county piece, which is allocated based on how many kids you have, right, and then the municipal piece. Well, Memphis traditionally invested about $70 million in education. That's going away. It's a big part of what's created the financial crisis for this consolidation. To Senator Kyle's point, the plans that we have put forth in the suburbs call for $2 million a year contribution from $2.1 million from the city of Germantown to the schools, $2 million out of 66. It is widely accepted what the senator said about impoverished children require greater resources. That's the whole purpose of Title I. That's where the federal money comes from, and that's why the federal funding for Memphis City Schools is $1,000, $1,200 per pupil, higher than it is for the suburban schools. And the Germantown municipal plan includes zero Title I dollars. So the state education formula also includes a premium or extra funds for at-risk children. My point is, yeah, they need more resources. Those resources are being provided at the federal and state level, and it's a mistake to try and drive that equity question down to the local level.
Ken, is there any scenario that you see that would be acceptable to you as someone who was elected to the Germantown School Board, short of Germantown having its own school board? Is there a charter set up? Is there something that could be on the table in these negotiations that gets you most of the way that you want to go?
Yeah. My personal stance is, as I said earlier, the fast lane has been closed, but the road is still open. Law of the land says we can form a municipal school district in August. That is the preferred path. That is clearly the best option available. It's well established. There are dozens of municipal school districts around the state, some of whom have histories of 100, 150, 200, not quite 200, 100, 150 years. It is a proven model that we can see and understand. Does that mean that there's no other option? No, it doesn't mean that there's no other option. But my personal preference would clearly be, let's form a municipal school district.
Senator, would these talks, in light of that, if that's a prevalent view in the suburbs, does Judge Mays have to rule on this before Commissioner Huffman can get any traction with either side?
Let me say this, until each side, I do mediations, I'm a lawyer, I do mediations all the time. Cases settle when people believe their risk of losing is at such a level that they need to take what they can get. What we've had for the last 2 years are people who don't think they're going to lose. Ken right here just told me, we're going to win. We're just going to draw this out. We're going to draw this out. We're going to win. Until people feel they got a chance that it isn't going to happen, what they want to have happen, they're not going to talk. And that, I do believe that Commissioner Huffman being involved can help explain to some folks, you just might not win. People have tried this in other parts of the country and it hasn't worked. or whatever,
Well, isn't also Hardy Mays the one who can say that to some extent, because he's come down with this ruling 2 weeks ago, but Bill, he's got 2 more rulings to come. One on the whole issue of segregation, civil rights, but the other on some other points within Norris Tide, the bill of funds.
Laws.
And you know, I mean, Hardy Mays has been, as we said before the show, a pretty good poker player. I mean, he's tried to use his rulings to force mediation. Isn't there a chance that he'll try to force mediation again once they get to the next couple of steps in the case? Or?
I don't know. He reads the papers and watches TV just like everyone else, so I would imagine he has heard of Senator Kyle's letter on this.
I'm just saying to you, I just believe Commissioner Huffman could walk into a room, and I don't know Commissioner Huffman that well, and with whatever position people have, and said, I don't really think that you're going to get a chance to do that.
Yeah.
Either because Commissioner Huffman may say, because as Commissioner of Education, I'm going to change the law.
Right.
To through the legislature. And I'm just saying to you, you've got somebody who's got that kind of authority.
Just a minute left. A question I've asked other folks from the suburbs on this side of the issue, Ken. As of right now, it looks like the Germantown schools, Bartlett, et cetera, will start within the unified school system in August. And then you all may well move forward to break off in 2014. What is your worst fear when schools open, August 2013? Do you have any fears on that first day? Or is it more a slow fear of losing control over time?
It's both. It's both. So Commissioner Jones was on the show last week, Martavius Jones of the Unified School Board, and he said, nothing will be different. Nothing will be different. I just told you there's going to be 160 fewer teaching positions. So he can advocate that Ms. Smith is still going to be in front of that classroom. And she may be. There'll be 2 more people in that classroom, 2 more students, because class sizes will grow. And Ms. Jones and Ms. Williams and Ms. Green, we're not sure they're coming back because we're cutting head count.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I cut you off. We ran out of time. Thank you both for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.